Late at night, a woman slipped skillfully into the restroom and answered a video call from her husband. But halfway through the conversation, she hurriedly hung up as her colleague suddenly walked in. Unsure whether her husband had noticed, she quickly asked John to drive her home. On the way, her husband kept calling, but Amy, afraid of exposing herself, declined every call. When the car stopped at a gas station, Amy went into the convenience store to buy some coffee to stay awake. At the checkout, however, she realized there was no cashier. Helpless, she left some cash on the counter and prepared to leave. Just then, she noticed blood splattered across the shelves. Before she could react, a bullet fired from the shadows struck her arm. Enduring the pain, Amy hid behind a shelf and shouted for John, but he couldn't hear her. Moments later, a man's voice came through the walkie-talkie. Desperately, she explained she was under attack and begged him to call the police. Meanwhile, outside, John also sensed something was wrong. Although the car had just been refueled, the gauge showed the tank was empty. Kneeling down to check, he discovered a hole had been drilled in the fuel tank. As he rushed toward the store, another bullet hit him, sending him to the ground. Hopeless, Amy pleaded again over the radio. The man reassured her, saying the police would arrive in about 15 minutes, and began chatting with her to ease her fear. But when the conversation turned to John, his tone grew cold. Actually, I was the one who killed your colleague. Horrified, Amy realized she had been talking to the killer all along. To stop him from tracking her, she cut the power. The store was plunged into darkness and the gunfire briefly ceased. While tending to her wound, Amy spotted a row of umbrellas. A bold idea struck her. She opened them one by one, creating makeshift barriers along the aisles, then crept toward the back door. But it was locked tight. Exhausted, she tried, and failed to break it open, forcing her to attempt an escape through the front. After a short rest, she staggered toward the car, only to find the fuel tank completely drained. Panicked, she was spotted by the killer and shot again, this time in the thigh. Overwhelmed by pain and blood loss, she nearly blacked out, but the voice on the walkie-talkie jolted her awake. Once more, Amy dressed her wound. Repeated failed escape attempts finally broke her spirit. She grabbed the radio and hurled curses at the killer. Just then, headlights appeared outside. Summoning her last strength, she dragged herself toward the entrance. An elderly man had noticed the car and instinctively went to check. His wife, sitting inside, saw her husband collapse and assumed he had suffered a medical emergency. When she rushed out, she too was struck by a bullet. Unable to hold back, Amy stormed out of the store, screaming in rage only to notice a little girl sitting inside the car. Amy quickly rushed back, motioned for the girl to duck, and scribbled a note urging her to run. But as the girl stepped onto the dark road, fear overcame her, and she ran back to Amy. By then, the killer had stood up, ready to finish them both himself. Amy grabbed the girl and fled toward the back door. She picked up a hacksaw lying on the ground and, as the killer drew closer, managed to saw through the lock. But with the power cut, the rolling shutter wouldn't open. Amy hid the girl and prepared herself for a final confrontation. Holding her breath behind a shelf, she ambushed the killer with a steel rod. When he staggered, she grabbed a fire extinguisher and smashed it toward his head, but he swatted it aside and shoved her to the ground. In the struggle, she stabbed his arm with a sharp object and seized his gun. They wrestled fiercely until a gunshot rang out. Amy collapsed in front of the girl, seemingly unconscious. The killer searched the storeroom and found the girl. As he reached to pull off his mask, Amy